Hey everyone, Mr. Dempsey here. This is a guide for around 6 other Manufacturer Series Exhibition Season 2. Let's get this started. Your first braking point is going to be before you pass the curb, that is before the 100 meter mark. You want to brake hard for a short while, slowly ease off of the brakes, and your goal is to adjust the car by using braking and throttle control to get the car pointing towards the next section of the track as soon as possible so you can start to fully accelerate. Now look for the second Pirelli sign, and that is going to be your turning point, and that is also where you want to use little bits of braking. You want to slow down while still having the ability to turn and go for this final apex. This is where you want to start to accelerate, and then you want to brake as you go under the Dragon Trail sign. Bring yourself to the right side of the track, then do a left off-road throttle through this turn. Try to take this right turn flat out if you can, if not, do a short lift. Then brake before you reach the 100 meter mark, but do not brake on the curbs. Braking on the curbs will make your braking distance a bit longer. So you want to try to hit the apex, don't go too much into the curbs, get the car pointing where you want to go, and start to fully accelerate. Now for the Chicane of Death, you're going to take it a little differently than usual. There are 2 red curves on the Chicane of Death, and you want to avoid the first one. So brake at the 100 meter mark, brake hard for a short moment, slowly ease off of the brakes. Avoid this first one as hitting it will ruin your race, but you can adjust the car to go over this second one. Then do a left off-road throttle. Do not cut this corner, otherwise you will fly off the track. Then start to accelerate, turn in when the curb on the left ends, and all you need to do is just lift off our throttle, wait until the curb on the right ends before you accelerate. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you're only going to have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. So you want to try to come out of the pit stop as soon as you can, and try to find a slipstream buddy if possible, as the slipstream will help you out on the back straight and the main straight. So you also want to keep in mind that the tire wear is a little bit on the higher side for this race, so you do want to make sure that you're not too hard on your tires on your outlap, so you can have as much tire life that you will need, or as much tire grip that you will need when you do your actual qualifying lap. And your actual qualifying lap is going to start just after the Chicane of Death. So you're going to go through the Chicane of Death, is try to go through it as cleanly as possible. Try to get this turn right and the final turn, because these 2 turns, if you get them right, you'll be able to have a good start to your qualifying lap. If you mess up one of those 2 turns, then you're going to get a bad start to your qualifying lap. And the number of chances that you'll get to try to get the best time possible will depend on when you come out of the pit stops. So let's say that you are on the very front of the pit lane and you come out first, then you're most likely going to have 3 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. If things don't end up going well, you are in the back or you come out last, then you're only going to have 2 chances to try to get a good qualifying time. And in this run, I was pretty lucky and I was able to squeeze in a 3rd qualifying time. So as you see on the timer on the right, I have 16 seconds to try to cross the finish line, and luckily I'm going to have around 10 seconds left. So that means that I can go ahead and do my 3rd qualifying lap. This lap is obviously not going to be my best because the tire wear is already kicking in, but it's still good practice, good warm-up before the actual race. Now it is possible to be extremely lucky and do the jump out and jump back in strategy, but you're going to need to be at the very front of the pit lane and be one of the first people to come out of the pit stop. So to get this to work, you need to be at the very front of the pit stop, you need to be one of the first people to come out, and you need to get your butt all the way around the track as fast as you can. Don't do any tire saving, because you need to get your first qualifying lap started right away. So in this run, I'm going to attempt it. Take note of my outlap, which is a 1:39, and I'm going to cross the finish line right now, and I'm going to do the jump out and jump back in strategy as fast as I can. And I have to take into account the time I'm spending in the menus, so I really need to get everything right. And for those who don't know what the jump out and jump back in strategy is, this is where when you finish a qualifying lap, you press options, exit, and in the lobbies you press enter course, or during the actual race day itself, you press the qualifying button. This will save you from having to do an in-lap and do the whole pit stop animation sequence. You just spawn back at your pit box with a new set of racing soft tires or whatever tires you have on, and all you have to do is just do an outlap and then do your next qualifying lap. So my outlap on the first stint was a 1:39, and I have to try to see if I can get a faster time than that because I am barely having enough time to try to get into the next qualifying lap, and looks like I'm going to be very lucky and be able to do another qualifying lap on a new set of racing soft tires. And I only have 3 seconds left, so it's going to be very close if you try to do this, but you need to be very lucky and spawn at the very front of the pit lane and be one of the first people to come out. So it is possible to do this, but this one is very risky, so most likely you're going to be doing the first strategy where you just do a normal qualifying session like a normal person. So for this race, we are doing 20 laps on Dragon Trail Gardens in reverse, and this track is very cursed because we have the Chicane of Death. I also just realized I had an accent, but oh well. Anyways, so we have the racing soft, medium, and hard tires available for us to use, and all 3 tires are required to be used, so make sure you use all 3 tire compounds so you don't get a 1-minute penalty after the race ends. The tire wear rate is a ×6, which means that tires will be a problem for us. The fuel is a ×2, which means that fuel will not be a problem for most, if not all of us. So this is all about trying to make your tires last as long as possible and just trying to make them do the most that they can for you. And I just want to note, when you're going through these turns, which I call the Pentagon, do not get on the red area unless if you're exiting the Pentagon, for example in this area right here. This area, it's fine to get on the red stuff, but during the actual Pentagon turns, do not get on the red stuff because your car will not have the grip and it's going to want to lose control, and you might actually lose control and you're going to make yourself look silly. The other part that you really want to be careful with is with the Chicane of Death and the right turn that follows right after it. So when you're going through the Chicane of Death, avoid the first big red sausage curb. If you hit it, it's going to ruin your run. If you hit the red curb and hit it completely wrong, it's going to ruin your run. If you try to cut the corner of this right turn right here, it's going to ruin your run. And here I actually got lucky because I didn't get sent off to space. And finally, do not mess up this hairpin at the very start of the lap, because if you get too much onto the grass, you're going to end up spinning out, take someone out, and make yourself look like an idiot, like how I did. Oh my gosh, I really hate this track. But anyways, going on over to the strategies. So for this race, I tested the 2 and the 3 stop, and interestingly, both strategies seem to be viable for this race. With the 2 stop, you avoid the 3rd stop obviously, which means that it is possible to catch a couple of the people doing the 3 stop off guard. But with the 3 stop, it allows you to push your car even more because you're spending 2 stints on the racing soft tires, and then you're spending a shorter stint on the racing medium tires, which means that you're only going to spend 1 lap on the racing hard tires. So the strategy that you want to go with is going to be a little dependent on where you're starting, how the environment is around you, especially early on in the race, and on the car that you are using. If your car is good on the tires, it is possible to try to make the 2-stop work. If your car is average or bad on the tires, then you can go for the 3-stop. But once again, if you want to try to push and spend more time on the softer tire compounds, then you can still go for the 3-stop. And as we see here, we're taking a look at a pit stop sequence. We're only changing tires for all of our pit stops fuel is not needed, so we don't have to worry about that. Just be careful when you enter the pit stop because it is right after the final turn, so it is going to be a little easy to miss if you're not paying attention. And I just want to note, if you're starting in the front, you can start on the racing soft tires. If you're starting in the middle, start on the racing medium tires. And if you're in the back, start on the racing hard tires. If you're starting in the back, you just want to get the worst tire compound out of the way as soon as you can, so you can spend the rest of the race on the softer and faster tire compounds. The other thing is that there are going to be people trying to make their tires last. So for example, the person in first place is trying to do 7 laps on the racing soft tires. So I'm going to end up being held up by him for a bit until he enters the pit stop. So that is something that you will have to take in account of, and you're going to need to try to get around him as soon as you can, because the longer that you hang out behind him, the more time that you'll end up losing. And to try to make this clear, I did a 2-stop and a 3-stop in a lobby, so I was racing with other people, and in both races I ended up getting a 30 minutes and 45 seconds. So both strategies are viable, but the thing is that if you get held up by someone for whatever reason, then that's really going to hurt you, because that 1 second that you've been held back for could make a big difference between you finishing behind a 2-stopper or behind a 3-stopper, depending on what you and those around you are running. And that is actually going to happen in a later run, which I'm going to show in a bit. But going on over to the tires, because I still need to talk about that, the racing soft tires will last you 6 to 7 laps depending on the car that you're using and your own driving style. So in this first run, I was able to make the soft tires last 6 laps, but in the other run that I'll show later, I was able to make the soft tires last 7 laps. The racing medium tires can last you as long as 8 to 10 laps depending on how you treat the tires, and the racing hard tires, you just want to try to use them for as few laps as possible. So in this run, I am going for the 2-stop, and the car in front of me is actually going for the 3-stop, so this will be pretty interesting to see which strategy ends up working out better. So I'm going 7 soft, which I already did that stint not too long ago. Then I'm going for 10 laps on the racing medium tires, which means that I'm going to do 3 laps on the racing hard tires. The car in front is going 7 laps on the soft tires, another 7 laps on the soft tires, 5 laps on the racing medium tires, which leaves 1 lap on the racing hard tires. And right now he is on the racing soft tires, so he's lapping on average 1 second per lap faster than me, so it is my job to try to just keep up with him. My goal is to try to make sure that the gap between him and I doesn't get too big, because he's going to eventually have to do 1 extra pit stop, and I want to try to overtake him as he exits the pit stop. So we're going to skip on over to the very end of our racing medium stint, and we're going to change on over to the racing hard tires since this is our very last pit stop. Remember that thing I mentioned about having to deal with other traffic as you exit the pit stop? Unfortunately, that's going to end up happening to us. So this lovely individual is going to end up getting in our way, just getting right in front of us just as we exit the pit stop, and unfortunately we're going to end up being held back by him. So we end up losing around 1 second, and that is just enough for the person in first place to be able to seal the win. What do I mean by that? We'll show in a bit. And I'm basically stuck behind him. I have the racing hard tires, so I can't really do much. So unfortunately, I am stuck behind him until he goes to the pit stops at the end of this lap. And we're going to skip on over to the very end of the race, or near the very end of the race. So first place is going to make the pit stop right now. And if I was just a little bit further up, I would be able to catch up to him right as he exits the pit stop, but because I got held back not too long ago, he's going to have around a 1.5 second barrier between him and I. And just being held back by the car earlier was just enough for first place to basically be able to secure the win. And if I didn't get held back for that one lap, losing that 1 second, then I'd be able to catch up to him right as he comes out of the pit stops, and we'd be having a battle to the death for the win. But unfortunately, this wasn't meant to be. I got held back, and that was just enough. For him to be able to get away with the win. So at the end of the day, which strategy should you go with? As I said earlier, this one is a bit up in the air. Both strategies are pretty viable for different reasons. The 2-stop avoids that extra pit loss time from the 3rd pit stop, which means that it is possible for you to catch up to those doing the 3-stop. And for those doing the 3-stop, you can push even more with the extra racing soft stint, and you'll only have to spend 1 lap on the racing hard tires. So if I were to have to choose which strategy to go with, I'm actually going to say to go with the 3-stop, just because you can push a bit more. But you just want to be careful about getting held up, because if you get held up, that is really going to hurt you. So you want to try to get around those slower cars as fast as you can. Just make the battles nice and quick. And before I go, I would like to show places to overtake, or the best places to overtake, and the penalty serving zones. So we just went through the main straight. That is a really good place to try to get overtake done. Just try to get the inside line for the hairpin, and the same thing is going to go for here. This is another place to potentially get an overtake done. Get the inside line before you reach the pentagon, or what I call the pentagon. After that, it's going to be pretty difficult to get any sort of overtaking done through this section right here, because this is more of a single file area. So we're going to go ahead and skip on through to the hairpin, because this section after the hairpin is also another good place to potentially get an overtake done. You do have to be careful, because you do want to be aware that you are entering the chicane of death. So try to get the inside line if possible, and try not to hit the big red curb. And after that, this will eventually lead to the main straight, which I mentioned earlier is another good place to get an overtake done. And there's 2 penalty serving zones, and we'll talk about the second one, which is just after the pit stop before the start finish line. So this is the second one that you come across in your lap, and the first one was actually in the back straight before the chicane of death. So just after the hairpin, here's the second penalty serving zone. This one will make you pay the price a bit more than the one at the start finish line, because this one is pretty early on the straight. So you're going to lose more time, especially even more time if you have a lot of time to serve for the penalties. But that is pretty much it for this guide. Just don't forget that all 3 tire compounds need to be used for this race, so you don't get the 1-minute penalty that gets applied after the race ends. 2-stop and 3-stop are viable for this race, but if you want to push a bit more, then you can go for the 3-stop. But that's all from me. I'm going to sign off now. So this is Mr. A wishing you a happy new year, and I'll see you in the next video.